When playing Silent Hill, there was one question that came up again and again. What exactly is Silent Hill anyway? We know that James arrives there upon receiving a letter from his dead wife Mary, getting sent on a search for a dead person in an abandoned town that is stormed by otherworldly strange monsters. Silent Hill 2 is highly influenced by Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment, where the protagonist Rodion Raskolnikov has to confront himself with the fact of being a murderer. Like in the book, the game goes into a deep psychological insight into the turmoil of the characters. From the beginning of the game, it seems people who are in a horrible place in life are naturally drawn to Silent Hill and are experiencing the town all in their own way, with their own repressed mental images and concepts from the unconscious mind becoming manifested in physical form. The lying figures, for example, being humanoid creatures with its arms wrapped in its own flesh, as if wearing a straitjacket, reflecting James' mental state of being stuck. The nurse, clearly sexualized, representing James' repressed sexual desires during Mary's hospital stay. Silent Hill is full of symbolism. In fact, it's mostly through these that the story is told. Besides James in Silent Hill, there are Angela and Eddie. Eddie, probably the most deranged of all of them, introduced to us kneeling over a toilet seat, puking out of disgust from what he has seen in the town. He was bullied his entire life during his formative years, which led him to one day snap at one of his bullies, hurting one of them and killing his dog. So he was drawn to Silent Hill, where he is now to be confronted with the rage and the darkness that led him to his actions. Angela, on the other hand, had a horrible childhood, full of abuse, especially sexual abuse by her father, which led her to killing him in an act of revenge. We can see her struggling with both suicidal thoughts and trust issues, especially towards men. She's looking for her mother in Silent Hill. The only thing she started telling herself was worthwhile and prevented her from taking her own life. So what is the story with James Sunderland? Unlike in Crime and Punishment, where we are introduced from the beginning of the book with the protagonist's crime, we don't know what James did, or if he did something at all. We only know he's looking for his already dead wife after having received a letter from her saying she wants to meet him again in her special place, which in itself puts a lot of question marks in the player's mind regarding James' sanity. But James seems to be somewhat normal, unlike the other characters in his behavior. His unmovedness by the monsters in the town, however, might be mistaken as bravery in the beginning, but really, as more one progresses through the story, one understands that he just has nothing to lose. For the most time of the game, we think of James being innocent, unlike the other characters. But as we progress through the story, we start to learn that the reason for his wife's death wasn't just her illness, as he likes to talk about it, but that he actually killed her on her dying bed because he wanted his life back. But what is the point of the town at all? Does the town help these people by forcing them to confront the unconscious? Is it just there to punish them? The motivation which led them all to come there to the town, as you have probably guessed already, is just a lie. Eddie won't find a place where he can hide from what he has done, Angela won't find her mother, and James not his real wife. So what is it that drove them all to come to such a horrible place? Guilt is one of the strongest and debilitating human emotions, with countless religions making it a core subject for centuries, trying to free people from it by metaphysical forgiveness, by a god, and confession being a core part of its body of belief. Guilt, like shame, is a strange emotion, found in its highest form in mammals, especially in primates, both emotions' primary purpose being only to enforce social belonging and stability, by inhibiting us to choose actions for ourselves that would otherwise harm the group identity. We are biologically wired to react to perceived injustice, but in the human dimension it is more complicated, being able to feel bad for one's actions based on morals, ethics and the law, all being abstract ideas in itself. But what happens when we repress it? As psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud pointed out, the repression to the unconscious mind of any given emotion that would otherwise hurt our ego only acts as a temporary coping mechanism, which will only fuel and make it grow in the unconscious, in the background, only to come back later bigger than before. The confrontation with the emotion in what we have done is inevitable, whether we wanted to do or not. While with Eddie, that coping mechanism throughout his life was his relationship with food.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
Which led him to be bullied in the first place, we can see him justify his crimes with his bully's behavior. But ironically, we see him having become only that what he once fought against. With Angela, her abusive upbringing was the justification for her actions, with which she, at least in the beginning, tried to comfort herself. Both of these characters at least initially tried to justify their actions before realizing that what they really wanted all along is just punishment and not justification, which is also why they came to Silent Hill in the first place, to find redemption. There is no judge in Silent Hill except for the characters themselves, since Silent Hill only acts as their own projection of themselves. The fate of these two characters ends rather tragically, unlike James. Both Eddie and Angela decide to go out on their own terms. While Eddie decides to go out by making us kill him on his crazy rampage, Angela realizes that her mother was dead all along and she's not coming back. Her only reason keeping her alive being gone, she decides to walk up the stairs of a burning building, setting her fate in stone. James' repressed unconscious, on the other hand, is more tricky. We can see him throughout the whole game lying to himself about Mary's death, to protect his idea of himself, often saying she died of the illness, seemingly not being able to even consider that he might have had a role in it all. Only after Eddie's takedown we can see him starting to implement the idea into his thinking. There is also Maria, an image created of his own psyche, of his deceased wife, only a more sluttier and flirtier version of her, being the projection of how James probably wanted her to be during her last days. In the first playthrough, before I knew he was a killer, I thought maybe James felt guilty about his sexual urges and fantasies about other women during her last days, but it wasn't just that what was eating at him. It turns out to be something far more darker behind all that. One of the most iconic monsters of Silent Hill, Pyramid Head, a highly debated and analyzed to death character, being one of the only monsters which you can't kill in Silent Hill, coming back no matter how much damage you deal. I personally think that Pyramid Head is James' own guilt personified, or to be more specific, he represents his Freudian superego. The only way to get rid of him is by James realizing that Pyramid Head wasn't anything other than just his own aspect of his own mind, by Pyramid Head's own suicide symbolically representing James letting go of his guilt here for a moment, with no superego in the way to protect him from himself anymore, allowing us finally to talk to the real Maria through James' memory and confronting himself with what he has done.
Forgive me.
I told you that I wanted to die, James. I wanted the pain to end.
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer. No. That's not the whole truth. You also said that you didn't want to die. The truth is, part of me hated you for taking away my life.
You killed me, and you're suffering for it. It's enough, James.
Silent Hill, like Crime and Punishment, perfectly describes how people deal with guilt, describing it as a personal hell for the ones at fault. If a person without psychopathic tendencies does something bad, he will feel guilty for it. If you steal an apple from the store, you might feel bad for it for a day or two and then never think about it again. But if you kill another human being, It will haunt you for the rest of your life. All of these characters in Silent Hill had their reasons for their crimes. Some of them, like Angela's, might even seem only natural, like James' sexual fantasies. But the whole point of Silent Hill is about their inability to come to terms with their own guilt. They are their own judge, being sent to the town by their superegos, so to speak. So, what is Silent Hill? Silent Hill is the place where our psyche takes us to when we know we have done something horrible and nothing can take it back anymore. It's the place where our psyche wanders to when we regret our past, making us feel like we don't deserve anything good anymore, and the past constantly casts a shadow over the present and future. It's the place where we go when we realize we were the guilty and not the victim. It's the place where we go to search for our own punishment, in the desperate hopes that we find redemption in that punishment, so we can move on. All of these characters were drawn to Silent Hill for these reasons. Have you ever been to Silent Hill? I know I have.